a historical mystery that had remained hidden for over 700 years beneath an ordinary farmhouse, ancient inscriptions that would summon archaeologists from 3 continents to a forgotten rural community, all triggered by one single mother's desperate attempt to provide an affordable home for her children and the crumbling basement that held the key to what experts are now calling the most significant medieval discovery of the century. Before we dive into this extraordinary journey, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if this intrigues you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something truly remarkable for you. The autumn wind rattled the windows of Rebecca Sullivan's cramped 2-bedroom apartment as she stared at the eviction notice in her trembling hands. 30 days. After 7 years in the same building, the new owners were converting to luxury condominiums, and she and her 2 children had just 30 days to find a new home in a housing market that had become impossible for a single-income family. At 37, Rebecca had built what she thought was a stable life after her divorce 5 years earlier. Her position as research coordinator at the university library wasn't glamorous, but it had provided enough for rent, basic expenses, and even a modest college fund for the kids. But 6 months ago, budget cuts had eliminated her position, and the part-time reference work she'd managed to secure paid barely half her former salary. "Mom, are you okay?" Zoe's voice pulled Rebecca from her worried thoughts. At 14, her daughter was perceptive enough to read the tension in her mother's shoulders. "We need to talk," Rebecca said, gathering Zoe and 10-year-old Finn at their small kitchen table. "The building's being sold, and we need to find a new place to live." "Can we get a house with a yard?" Finn asked immediately, his face lighting up. Their apartment's tiny balcony had never been enough for his boundless energy. "Maybe not in the city," Rebecca admitted, "but I've been looking into other options." Those other options consumed her every waking moment over the next week. Rental. Prices had skyrocketed throughout the metro area. Each listing search grew more desperate as affordable apartments showed waitlists dozens of names long. With time running short, Rebecca expanded her search to increasingly distant communities. That's when she saw it. A listing so out of place among the sleek apartment advertisements that she almost scrolled past. A 2-story farmhouse on 5 acres located in Millfield, a small town just over 3 hours from the city. The asking price was so low that Rebecca initially assumed it was a scam or had a decimal point in the wrong place. The listing included only 3 grainy photos. A distant exterior shot, a glimpse of a kitchen with dated appliances, and an overgrown yard with what might have once been a garden. The description was sparse. "Historic Harrington farmhouse, year 1880, needs TLC, sold as is, cash offers preferred." Under normal circumstances, Rebecca would never have considered such a remote property. Her life, the children's schools, her professional network, everything was in the city. But circumstances were far from normal, and the desperate reality of their situation forced her to consider options that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. "I've found something," she told the children that evening, showing them the listing on her laptop. "It's different from what we're used to." "It looks haunted," Zoe said, wrinkling her nose at the shadowy exterior photo. "It looks like an adventure," Finn countered, already imagining exploration and discovery. Rebecca had already calculated the numbers. Between her savings, a loan from her parents, and the severance package she'd received, she could just manage a cash offer. It would leave them with a razor-thin financial margin, but they would have a roof over their heads, one that couldn't be sold out from under them again. The real estate agent sounded shocked when Rebecca called the next day. "The Harrington place? You actually want to see it?" The property had been on the market for over a year, with no serious interest. Rebecca scheduled a viewing for the weekend. The 3-hour drive to Millfield took them through increasingly rural landscapes until they reached a town that seemed frozen in time. The main street featured a handful of small businesses, a grocery, a hardware store, a diner, and a post office, surrounded by scattered houses and farmland. People actually live here? Zoe asked, unable to imagine life so far from coffee shops and shopping malls. The real estate agent, Mrs. Patterson, met them at the town's only gas station. "It's about 2 miles outside town," she explained, as they followed her car down winding country roads. "Been empty since William Harrington passed. Must be 15 years now. The county's been maintaining the property taxes, but they're eager to get it off their books." When they finally pulled into the long gravel driveway, Rebecca's heart sank. The listing photos had been generous. The 2-story farmhouse had clearly been handsome once, with a broad front porch and elegant proportions. But years of neglect had taken their toll. Paint peeled from the clapboard siding in long strips, several windows were boarded over, and the porch roof had partially collapsed on one side. "It's a bit rough around the edges," Mrs. Patterson admitted, struggling with the front door key. "But the county inspector says the foundation and main structure are sound. It's mostly cosmetic work needed." Rebecca had renovated enough apartments to know cosmetic work rarely stayed cosmetic once you started pulling at loose threads. Still, they had driven 3 hours, and they needed to see what they were dealing with. The interior was a time capsule. Furniture draped in yellowed sheets, bookshelves sagging under the weight of hundreds of volumes, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that penetrated the grimy windows. But beneath the neglect were glimpses of quality craftsmanship: hardwood floors, intricate moldings, a carved staircase banister that spoke of an era when homes were built to last generations. William Harrington was some kind of historian, Mrs. Patterson explained as they toured the ground floor. Taught at the State University until he retired. Bit of a recluse in his later years, according to locals. No family came forward after he passed, so eventually the property went to the county. "What are these?" Finn asked, pointing to peculiar symbols carved into the wooden mantelpiece above the fireplace. "Oh, the house has all sorts of odd details like that," Mrs. Patterson replied dismissively. "William was interested in medieval history, I believe. He added his own touches over the years." While Zoe inspected the vintage kitchen with its ancient appliances and Finn explored the parlor, Rebecca tried to assess the scope of what would be needed. New roof, certainly. Electrical would need updating. Plumbing was anyone's guess, but the walls seemed straight, the floors didn't sag, and despite the musty odor, she detected no smell of rot or mold. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Patterson said, leading them to a heavy wooden door at the end of the main hallway. "The basement. Unfortunately, I don't have the key for this door. County workers who cleared the property after William's death couldn't locate it. They said there's nothing down there but his workshop and storage, so they didn't bother forcing the lock." Rebecca examined the door with interest. Unlike the weathered interior doors throughout the house, this one appeared solid and well-maintained, with an ornate iron lock that looked more appropriate for a medieval church than a farmhouse. "How much?" Rebecca asked as they concluded the tour. Mrs. Patterson named a figure that, while still the lowest property price Rebecca had encountered in months of searching, seemed ambitious given the condition. "Half that," Rebecca countered. "And I can close with cash in 2 weeks." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up. "You're serious? I mean, I'll have to take it to the county administrator, but—" "I'm serious," Rebecca confirmed, "but I need to know today." 2 frantic weeks followed. Paperwork, bank transfers, hurried goodbyes to city friends, and rushed packing of their apartment. Rebecca found temporary remote work doing database management to supplement their dwindling funds. Zoe and Finn were enrolled in Millfield's small school system for the fall term, beginning in 3 weeks. It wasn't until the autumn wind rattled the windows of Rebecca's aging SUV as they pulled into the overgrown driveway, now officially their driveway, that the reality of what she had done truly hit her. Her entire financial safety net had been converted into this dilapidated structure, and 5 acres of unkempt land, 3 hours from anything familiar. "Mom, is this really it?" asked Zoe, peering through the rain-streaked window at the weathered house. "That's what the deed says. 458 Meadowbrook Lane," Rebecca confirmed, trying to hide her own uncertainty. "It's awesome," declared Finn, already jumping out of the car despite the drizzling rain. As they unloaded the essentials they'd brought for their first night, a pickup truck pulled alongside them. An elderly woman in weathered overalls approached, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "Thought you might be arriving today," she called over the sound of the rain. "Martha Jenkins. I'm your nearest neighbor about half a mile down the road." Martha offered a basket of homemade bread, preserves, and a thermos of hot soup as a welcome gift. In her late 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical braid and hands that showed decades of farming work, she had the direct manner of someone accustomed to rural self-sufficiency. "Didn't expect anyone would buy the old Harrington place," she said, helping them carry supplies onto the covered portion of the porch. "Been empty since old William passed. Most folks figured it would fall down before someone took it on." "The price was right," Rebecca admitted, not wanting to reveal just how desperate their situation had been. Martha's expression softened with understanding. "Well, the bones are good. House like this was built to last, just needs someone to care for it again." She helped them force open a side entrance where the door seemed less swollen with moisture. Inside, the musty air carried decades of neglect. But Rebecca was relieved to see that the structure indeed seemed sound. "I knew William for nearly 50 years, Martha explained, as they explored the ground floor. "Brilliant man. Eccentric, especially in his later years, but kind. Used to help local farmers with their paperwork, translate letters for immigrants, never charged a penny." "The real estate agent mentioned he was a historian," Rebecca said, watching as Finn and Zoe explored the front rooms, pulling sheets off furniture and opening cabinets. "Medieval studies primarily. European history. Had quite a reputation in academic circles, I gather, though you'd never know it to talk to him. After he retired from the university, he spent most of his time in the basement." "The basement?" Rebecca asked, noticing how both children immediately perked up at the mention. "His workshop, called it his research chamber. Never let anyone down there, not even me. And I brought him meals when the weather was bad." Martha pointed to the heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway. "That's the entrance, though it was always locked when I came by." Rebecca approached the door, running her fingers over the intricate iron lock. "The county couldn't find the key." Martha shrugged. "William was very particular about his privacy. Used to joke that he was guarding ancient secrets." She smiled at the memory. "I always figured he just didn't want anyone disturbing his papers." When Martha left, promising to return the next day with more practical supplies and information about getting the utilities properly connected, the family began the process of making the house minimally habitable for the night. Rebecca focused on cleaning the kitchen and a small bedroom on the ground floor where they could all sleep until they properly cleaned the upstairs. Zoe, despite her initial skepticism about the move, took charge of organizing their supplies and making a list of immediate necessities. Finn, predictably, saw the whole situation as an adventure and spent his time exploring every corner of the house that Rebecca deemed safe. "Mom, look what I found," he called from what appeared to be a former study. The room contained floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with dusty volumes, a massive oak desk, and a faded oriental rug. Finn pointed to an open drawer where he'd discovered a ring of ancient-looking iron keys. "Good find, Finn," Rebecca said, taking the heavy ring. 7 keys hung from it, each with a different intricate pattern on its head, symbols that looked distinctly medieval, similar to the carvings on the fireplace mantel. "Maybe one opens the basement door," Zoe suggested, having warmed to the mystery. Despite herself, "We'll try them tomorrow when we have proper lighting," Rebecca decided, setting the keys aside. "Let's focus on getting some areas cleaned enough to sleep tonight." As evening fell, they ate Martha's soup and bread at a kitchen table they'd wiped down, using camping lanterns for light until they could check the electrical system properly. Rebecca had insisted on bringing sleeping bags for their first night, unsure about the condition of any bedding left in the house. "What do you think is in the basement?" Finn asked as they prepared for bed in the small ground-floor bedroom. "Probably just books and papers," Rebecca replied, though she couldn't help wondering herself. Why would a retired history professor be so secretive about his workspace? "I bet it's treasure," Finn insisted. "Or maybe a secret laboratory where he made discoveries the world wasn't ready for. Or maybe just a bunch of moldy boxes and spiders," Zoe countered, though her tone lacked conviction. After the children had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the move and excitement, Rebecca found herself unable to rest. The house creaked and settled around them, making unfamiliar noises that would take time to get used to. Through the window, the moonlight cast strange shadows from the gnarled apple trees in the overgrown orchard behind the house. Her gaze fell on the ring of keys they'd discovered. Curiosity finally overcoming caution, she took the lantern and made her way down the hallway to the basement door, driven by an inexplicable need to know what lay beyond it. The heavy oak door had held up better than much of the house, the wood still solid and the ornate hinges free from rust. The iron lock was a work of craftsmanship itself, with intricate patterns swirling around a keyhole that seemed larger than modern equivalents. Rebecca examined the keys in the lantern light. Each had a different symbol on its head: a tree, a star, a crescent moon, what appeared to be a bird, a mountain, a chalice, and a key with a symbol she couldn't quite identify, something like intertwined serpents. The first key, the one with the tree, didn't fit the lock. Neither did the star or the crescent moon. The bird key entered the lock but wouldn't turn. On the 5th attempt, the mountain key slid into the lock smoothly, but also refused to turn. "2 more," Rebecca muttered to herself, selecting the key with the chalice symbol. This one entered the lock and turned part way before stopping. She jiggled it gently, but it refused to complete the rotation. Only the serpent key remained. It slid into the lock with a satisfying precision that the others had lacked. When she turned it, the mechanism moved smoothly, and she heard the distinct sound of heavy bolts retracting inside the door. Heart racing with a mixture of triumph and inexplicable apprehension, Rebecca pushed against the door. It swung inward slowly, revealing a darkness deeper than the shadows of the hallway behind her. The air that escaped from the opening felt cool and carried a scent that was not the expected mustiness of a long-closed basement, but something else: stone, paper, and a hint of what might have been incense. Her lantern illuminated a steep staircase of stone, not wood, as would be expected in a farmhouse of this age. The steps descended at a sharp angle before curving out of sight. The walls of the stairwell appeared to be lined with stones fitted together with remarkable precision, more like the construction of a castle than a rural American home. Rebecca hesitated at the threshold. Everything about the basement entrance felt out of place, too solid, too carefully constructed, too old. Yet something about it called to her, a mystery waiting to be unraveled just beyond the reach of her lantern light. Gathering her courage, she began to descend the steps carefully. The stones felt solid underfoot, showing none of the wear or unevenness that might be expected in a staircase of apparent age. She trailed her free hand along the wall for balance and found the stones cool but not damp. The staircase curved too, the right as it descended, and Rebecca estimated she had gone down about 15 steps when she reached a small landing. From here, the stairs continued downward at a gentler angle. What struck her as odd was that she must now be well below what should be the normal basement level of a farmhouse. The foundation simply shouldn't extend this deep. Another 10 steps down, the staircase ended at another heavy door, this one made of dark wood, reinforced with iron bands. Unlike the door above, this one stood slightly ajar, a sliver of absolute darkness visible through the gap. Rebecca paused, listening intently. The silence was absolute, not even the sounds of the house above reaching this depth. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open wider and raised her lantern to illuminate what lay beyond. What the light revealed caused her to gasp audibly, the sound echoing in the space before her. She was not looking at a basement workshop, as she had expected, but a large chamber with a vaulted ceiling, its walls lined with fitted stone similar to the staircase. Elaborate carvings covered the archways and support columns, depicting scenes and symbols that her untrained eye nevertheless recognized as medieval in style. The center of the chamber was dominated by a large stone table or altar, its surface covered with objects she couldn't immediately identify. Around the perimeter stood wooden cabinets, glass-fronted cases containing books and artifacts, and what appeared to be maps or charts mounted on the walls. Rebecca stepped fully into the chamber, her lantern casting shifting shadows that made the carvings seem to move. This was no historian's casual workshop. This was a meticulous recreation of what appeared to be a medieval study or scriptorium, constructed with an attention to detail and authenticity that must have taken decades. As she approached the central stone table, the light revealed what lay upon it. An open manuscript, its pages illuminated with gold leaf and vivid pigments that had not faded despite their apparent age. Surrounding it were instruments she recognized from museum visits, a tazzy, compass, an astrolabe, what appeared to be measuring devices of brass and silver. But what truly caught her attention was a circular stone embedded in the floor near the table. About 3 feet in diameter, its surface was carved with concentric rings of symbols, some resembling the ones on the keys she had used. At the very center was a small depression that appeared to be shaped to receive something, an object roughly the size of her palm. Beside the stone table sat a modern desk with an incongruously contemporary laptop computer. Next to it lay a leather-bound journal with a bookmark protruding from its pages. Rebecca set down her lantern and picked up the journal, drawn by an inexplicable certainty that it would contain explanations for this extraordinary chamber. The journal's first pages contained entries dated 15 years earlier, in a precise handwriting she assumed belonged to William Harrington. The opening line sent a chill down her spine. After 30 years of searching, I have finally found conclusive evidence. The legends were not mere folklore. The gateway of Avallac'h was real, and its remnants lie directly beneath this property. What I initially mistook for a peculiar foundation when I purchased this house in 1972 was in fact the upper section of a structure that predates Columbus by centuries. European presence in North America long before the accepted historical record is now proven beyond doubt. Rebecca's hands trembled as she turned the pages, skimming entries that documented William's painstaking excavation and restoration of the chamber, his translations of symbols and texts found within the walls, and his increasingly excited discoveries about what he believed was an outpost established by medieval Welsh explorers led by a prince named Madoc, a legend long dismissed by mainstream historians. The final entry, dated just a week before William's death according to Martha's timeline, contained a passage that made Rebecca's breath catch. The keystone is the final piece. Once placed in the central node, it should complete the mapping configuration. If my translations are correct, it will reveal the locations of the other 11 sites across the continent. I've hidden it where only a true seeker would think to. Look, when the right person comes, they will understand its significance. Until then, the gateway remains sealed and its secrets protected. Rebecca lowered the journal, her mind racing. Gateway, Keystone, 11 other sites. What had William Harrington actually discovered beneath his farmhouse? She raised the lantern again, turning slowly to take in the full chamber. What she had initially taken for decorative carvings on the walls now revealed themselves as maps, coastlines she recognized as North America, but with markings and symbols scattered across the continent in a deliberate pattern. As she examined the nearest wall section more carefully, she noticed a series of inscriptions in a language she didn't recognize, but which used an alphabet that appeared to be a variant of Latin. Below these inscriptions was a line of text that sent another shock through her system, this one written in modern English, in what she now recognized as William's handwriting. When 12 become one, the lost shall be found. Avalon awaits the return of its children. Rebecca didn't know how long she stood there, absorbing the implications of what she was seeing. This wasn't just an eccentric professor's hobby project. The construction was too extensive, too authentic. The materials and methods used to create this underground chamber would have cost a fortune and required expertise beyond a single person's capabilities. Yet here it was, hidden beneath an ordinary farmhouse in rural America, apparently documenting a historical connection between medieval Wales and North America that would rewrite history books if proven authentic. A sudden noise from above startled her, a creaking floorboard that reminded her she had left her children sleeping upstairs. Reluctantly, but knowing she needed time to process what she'd discovered, Rebecca decided to return to the main house. She carefully closed the journal and placed it exactly where she had found it, an instinctive respect for the precision with which everything in the chamber was arranged, guiding her actions. As she climbed the stairs and secured the basement door behind her, Rebecca's mind was already racing with questions. Should she report this discovery? To whom? Would anyone even believe what lay beneath their new home without seeing it? She checked on Zoe and Finn, finding them still soundly asleep, unaware that their mother had just potentially stumbled upon what might be one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in North America. Returning to her sleeping bag, Rebecca knew sleep would be impossible now. She had bought this house out of financial desperation, seeing it as nothing more than affordable shelter during a difficult time in their lives. Now, she found herself the custodian of what might be a historical treasure of immeasurable value. What Rebecca couldn't possibly know as she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep was that her impulsive purchase of a shabby farmhouse was about to draw the attention of archaeologists, historians, and government officials from across the globe to her doorstep, and that the greatest secrets of William Harrington's underground chamber had yet to reveal themselves. Rebecca woke to sunlight, streaming through uncurtained windows, and the sound of Finn's excited voice outside. For a moment, she was disoriented, her mind struggling to reconcile the unfamiliar surroundings with memories of the previous night. Had she really discovered a medieval chamber beneath the farmhouse, or had exhaustion conjured an elaborate dream? She found Zoe in the kitchen, attempting to clean decades of dust from the countertops with supplies they'd brought from the apartment. Finn's exploring the orchard, Zoe explained, her earlier reluctance about the move seemingly replaced by pragmatic acceptance. There's an old well house back there that he's convinced contains treasure. Rebecca managed a smile despite her fatigue. Let's hope there's less treasure and more working plumbing in this house. Did you sleep okay? Better than I expected, Zoe admitted. This place is weird, but it feels, I don't know, solid somehow. She paused, studying her mother's face. "You look like you barely slept. Is everything okay?" "Just processing everything," Rebecca replied, unwilling to share her nocturnal discovery until she'd verified it in daylight. "There's a lot to take." After a breakfast of granola bars and bottled water, Rebecca suggested they make a supply run to town. Privately, she needed time to think, to plan her next steps regarding what lay beneath their new home. The logical part of her, the researcher who had spent years organizing and cataloging academic materials, knew she should document everything properly before proceeding further. In Millfield's small grocery store, they filled their cart with cleaning supplies, basic food staples, and hardware necessities. Rebecca noticed several locals eyeing them with undisguised curiosity. "You're the folks who bought the Harrington place, aren't you?" asked the cashier as she rang up their purchases. Her name tag identified her as Dolores, and her tone suggested genuine interest rather than simple nosiness. "Word travels fast," Rebecca observed with a tired smile. "Small town," Dolores replied with a shrug. "Plus, nobody's bought property around here in years, let alone the old professor's place. Folks are curious, is all." "Was Professor Harrington well known locally?" Rebecca asked casually, seizing the opportunity to gather information. "Oh, everybody knew William," Dolores confirmed, bagging their groceries. "Kept to himself mostly, but was always willing to help when asked. Translated old family documents, wrote letters for folks who needed assistance with official business. Had quite a reputation in academic circles too, from what I understand. Had visitors from universities sometimes, though he didn't seem to enjoy those much." "What did he teach exactly?" Rebecca pressed. "Medieval studies, I believe. European. History, ancient languages, that sort of thing. Used to joke that he knew more about 12th century Wales than he did about modern America." Dolores smiled at the memory. "Funny thing is, after he retired, he got even more intense about his research. Martha Jenkins would tell us he'd stay in that basement for days at a time. Called it his sacred work." Rebecca's heart quickened at this confirmation of William's obsession. "Did anyone ever see this work?" Dolores shook her head. "Not that I know of. William was private about it. There were rumors, of course. Some said he was looking for buried treasure. Others thought he was translating ancient texts. Small towns loved their mysteries." As they loaded supplies into the SUV, Rebecca noticed Zoe watching her with a thoughtful expression. At 14, her daughter had developed an uncanny ability to sense when adults were withholding information. "You know something about the basement, don't you?" Zoe asked directly as they drove back toward the farmhouse. "You tried the keys last night." Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "I did, and I found something unexpected." "Treasure?" Finn piped up from the back seat, immediately attentive. "Not exactly," Rebecca replied carefully. "More like a research space, but unusual. I need to examine it more carefully before jumping to conclusions." "Can we see it?" Zoe asked, her academic curiosity, a trait she'd inherited from her mother, clearly piqued. Rebecca considered the question. The basement chamber hadn't appeared dangerous, just puzzling, and perhaps additional eyes would provide perspective she might miss on her own. "After lunch," she decided. "Once we've unloaded the supplies." When they returned to the farmhouse, they found Martha Jenkins waiting on the porch with an elderly man in overalls, whom she introduced as her brother, Frank. He had brought his pickup truck loaded with practical housewarming gifts, a stack of seasoned firewood, a barely used propane heater, and most precious of all, a small gas-powered generator. "Power company says they can reconnect service tomorrow," Frank explained as he showed Rebecca how to operate the generator. "This should get you through tonight, enough to run some lights and maybe that old refrigerator if it still works." "This is incredibly kind," Rebecca said, genuinely touched by the neighborly gesture. Frank waved away her thanks. "Small towns? Look after their own, even the newcomers. Martha tells me you've got young ones to care for. Can't have them freezing in the September chill. While Finn enthusiastically helped Frank unload firewood and Zoe worked on making the kitchen functional, Martha drew Rebecca aside. "Did you find it?" the older woman asked quietly, her weathered face impossible to read. Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "Find what?" "The chamber." Martha's voice held no question, only certainty. "William's workshop beneath the house." Rebecca hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "You knew about it." "Not the details. William never showed me. Never showed anyone as far as I know. But he talked about it sometimes, especially in his final years when his health was failing." Martha's eyes held Rebecca's steadily. "He said he was waiting for the right person to continue his work, someone who would understand its importance." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you found the keys and opened the door," Martha replied. Simply, William believed that wouldn't happen by accident. He said the right person would be drawn to this place, would feel its significance. Rebecca thought of the improbable chain of events that had led her family to this remote farmhouse, her job loss, the apartment eviction, the housing crisis that had made conventional options impossible. Coincidence, surely, not destiny. "I'm just a librarian who needed affordable housing," she said firmly. Martha's smile held gentle understanding. "Perhaps, or perhaps you're exactly where you need to be." She glanced toward Frank, who was showing Finn how to properly stack firewood. "My brother and we promised William we'd watch over this place until the right person came. We've kept that promise for 15 years. Before Rebecca could respond, Frank called over to ask about checking the farmhouse's ancient water heater, and the moment for further questions passed. But as the siblings departed after several hours of practical assistance, Martha pressed something into Rebecca's hand, a small leather pouch that felt heavy for its size. "William left this with me," she said quietly, "said to give it to whoever found the chamber." Inside their newly functional kitchen, Rebecca waited until the children were occupied with unpacking before opening the pouch. It contained a small object wrapped in velvet cloth. Unwrapping it carefully, she revealed a stone disc, approximately 3 inches in diameter and half an inch thick. One side was perfectly smooth, while the other was intricately carved with symbols similar to those she had seen in the underground chamber. Concentric circles of what appeared to be an ancient script surrounding a central design that resembled a stylized tree with branches forming a perfect circle. Recognition dawned immediately. This must be the keystone mentioned in William's journal, the object meant to fit into the circular depression in the chamber floor. Rebecca carefully rewrapped it and tucked it into her pocket, its weight feeling suddenly significant beyond its physical presence. After a lunch of sandwiches made with supplies from their shopping trip, Rebecca fulfilled her promise to show the children the basement chamber. Their reactions upon seeing the stone staircase and vaulted underground room mirrored her own amazement from the night before. "This can't be part of the original farmhouse," Zoe declared, running her fingers over the precisely fitted stonework. "The construction techniques are all wrong." "It wasn't," Rebecca confirmed, showing them William's journal. According to his notes, the farmhouse was built on top of something much older. He spent decades excavating and restoring this chamber. Finn was drawn to the maps carved into the walls, tracing the unfamiliar markings with fascination. "What are all these symbols? They look like X marks the spot on a treasure map. That might not be far off," Rebecca admitted. William believed they marked the locations of other sites similar to this one across North America. Zoe, ever the practical one, was examining the modern desk with its laptop and research materials. "Do you think the computer still works? There might be more information stored on it." "Possibly if we can get power down here," Rebecca said, "but for now, let's focus on understanding what we're looking at." The family spent the afternoon documenting the chamber, measuring its dimensions, photographing the wall carvings and artifacts, and carefully examining William's journal and loose research notes. Rebecca was impressed by her children's methodical approach, especially Zoe's insistence on creating a proper inventory of everything they found. The journal revealed William's growing certainty that he had discovered evidence of pre-Columbian European contact with North America, specifically by Welsh explorers led by Prince Madoc in the 12th century. While this theory had been proposed by various historical researchers over the centuries, it had never gained mainstream academic acceptance due to lack of conclusive evidence. William, however, believed he had found that evidence, not just artifacts, but an entire intact structure that predated Columbus by over 300 years. More extraordinarily, his later journal entries suggested that this site was part of a network of similar locations across the continent, connected in some way he was still trying to understand when he died. "Mom, look at this," Zoe called, holding up a folder of photographs she'd found in one of the desk drawers. The images showed artifacts with distinct medieval European characteristics, carefully arranged and documented with measurement scales and location notes. He was conducting a proper archaeological investigation, Rebecca realized, examining the methodical documentation. These are field notes worthy of a professional excavation. But why didn't he publish his findings? Zoe asked the obvious question. If he really found evidence of medieval Welsh in America, it would be revolutionary. Rebecca turned to the final pages of William's journal, searching for answers. The entries became increasingly cryptic in the last months of his life. But certain passages stood out. The evidence must be presented as a complete system, not as isolated artifacts that could be dismissed as anomalies. The 12 sites form a pattern that cannot be explained by chance. Only when the keystone activates the mapping sequence will the full scope of what Madoc's expedition achieved become undeniable. And later, academic politics has always been vicious. Too many careers and reputations are invested in the current historical narrative. Premature disclosure would lead to immediate dismissal of the evidence, or worse, appropriation and misinterpretation by those who do not understand the pattern. When the right successor arrives, they will know how to proceed. He was waiting to find all 12 sites before going public, Rebecca interpreted aloud. He wanted irrefutable evidence. As the afternoon light began to fade and the generator's fuel supply limited their use of portable lamps, they reluctantly left the chamber. Rebecca secured the basement door behind them, the weight of the stone disc still in her pocket, its purpose now clearer, but its significance still not fully understood. That evening, after a simple dinner, and with Finn already asleep in his sleeping bag, Rebecca found Zoe sitting on the creaking porch steps, staring at the night sky, visible through breaks in the clouds. "You're thinking about the chamber," Rebecca observed, sitting beside her daughter. Zoe nodded. "If it's real, if Professor Harrington really found what he claimed, it changes everything we know about American history." "That's a big if," Rebecca cautioned, though her own excitement was difficult to contain. "We need expert opinions, proper archaeological assessment. But you believe it, don't you?" Zoe's perceptive gaze caught her mother's expression in the dim porch light. "You think he found something genuine?" Rebecca considered her answer carefully. "I think William Harrington was too meticulous, too methodical to have fabricated something like this. The construction alone would have required resources beyond what a single retired professor could reasonably access. So what do we do? It was the question Rebecca had been wrestling with since her first descent into the chamber. "We need to be careful," she said finally. "If this is as significant as it appears, it needs to be properly documented and protected. Amateur handling could damage or destroy valuable evidence. We should contact a university, Zoe suggested. Get professional archaeologists involved. That's the logical approach, Rebecca agreed. But William's concerns about academic politics give me pause. If we just call random experts, we could end up with people who dismiss the findings or, worse, damage the site trying to debunk it. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of their unexpected responsibility settling between them. We need someone who specializes in medieval European presence in North America, Rebecca decided. Someone with credibility, but also an open mind. I'll make some calls tomorrow. The next day brought the promised reconnection of electricity to the farmhouse, allowing Rebecca to power up her laptop and begin researching potential experts. It was a delicate balance, finding someone prominent enough in the field to lend credibility to their findings, yet open-minded enough to fairly evaluate evidence that might contradict established historical narratives. After several hours of research, one name kept appearing in connection with alternative theories of pre-Columbian European contact: Dr. Eleanor Kincaid, professor of medieval history and archaeology at Northbridge University. Her published papers showed a methodical, evidence-based approach to controversial historical claims, neither dismissing alternative theories outright nor accepting them without rigorous verification. More intriguingly, several of her recent publications specifically addressed the Madoc legend and potential archaeological evidence for Welsh exploration of North America. A video of her guest lecture at an international archaeology conference showed a poised, authoritative woman in her 50s who spoke with both academic precision and genuine passion for historical discovery. "She seems perfect," Zoe commented, watching the lecture video over Rebecca's shoulder. "Should we email her?" Rebecca shook her head. "This isn't something to put in an email that could be forwarded or shared. I think we need to call her directly." It took several attempts to navigate Northbridge University's phone system and reach Dr. Kincaid's office. When Rebecca finally got through, she was told by a teaching assistant that the professor was away at a conference in Boston but would return the following week. "Would you like to leave a message?" the assistant asked. "I should warn you that Dr. Kincaid receives numerous claims about supposed evidence for medieval European artifacts in America. She rarely has time to investigate personal collections." Rebecca hesitated, aware of how her story might sound to academic ears. "Please tell her that Rebecca Sullivan has purchased William Harrington's former property and has found something in his research chambers that she should see personally. It relates to the Madoc expedition sites." There was a pause on the line. "Did you say William Harrington?" "Yes. He was a professor of medieval studies. This was his home." "One moment, please." The line went silent briefly before the assistant returned. "Miss Sullivan, Dr. Kincaid has just happened to call in for messages. She'd like to speak with you directly. Can you hold?" Moments later, a crisp, authoritative voice came on the line. "This is Eleanor Kincaid. You found William Harrington's research?" "Yes," Rebecca confirmed, surprised by the immediacy of the response. "I recently purchased his farmhouse. There's an underground chamber with extensive documentation about what he believed was evidence of the Madoc expedition. Is the chamber intact? Has anything been removed or disturbed?" The questions came rapidly, with an urgency that suggested far more than casual interest. "It's exactly as he left it, as far as we can tell. We've only documented what we found. Nothing's been moved." A brief silence followed. "Miss Sullivan, William Harrington was one of the most brilliant medieval scholars of his generation. His sudden withdrawal from academic life 15 years ago was a significant loss to the field. Many of us wondered what research had consumed him so completely." "You knew him?" Rebecca asked. "I was a doctoral student when he was still teaching. He was a mentor briefly before he retired. Dr. Kincaid's voice held a mixture of respect and what might have been regret. His theories about pre-Columbian Welsh contact were controversial, but his methodology was impeccable. If he believed, he found conclusive evidence. She trailed off, then continued with renewed focus. I'm cutting my conference visit short. I can be in Millfield the day after tomorrow. Would you be willing to show me what you found? Rebecca felt simultaneous relief and apprehension. This was moving faster than she had anticipated. Yes, of course, but I should mention that Professor Harrington's notes indicate this site is part of a larger pattern, 12 locations across North America. He seemed to believe they were connected somehow. Another silence, longer this time. The 12 Havens of Madoc, Dr. Kincaid said finally. Her tone shifted to something like wonder. It was his theory 20 years ago that Madoc's expedition established 12 interconnected settlements following sacred geometric patterns. The academic community considered it speculative at best. He has maps, Rebecca offered, carved into the chamber walls with locations marked, and something he called a keystone that supposedly activates a mapping sequence. Don't touch anything further, Dr. Kincaid instructed, her voice now urgent. Especially anything that might be the keystone. If William was right, if he actually found physical evidence of the 12 Havens, this could be the most significant archaeological discovery in North America in decades. I'll bring proper documentation equipment and a small team I trust implicitly. After arranging details for the visit, Rebecca hung up, unsure whether to feel relieved or overwhelmed. Dr. Kincaid's reaction had confirmed the potential significance of what lay beneath their new home, while simultaneously raising the stakes of how they proceeded. That afternoon, Rebecca returned to the chamber alone, drawn by an inexplicable need to understand more before experts arrived. The stone disc from Martha Jenkins weighed in her pocket, its purpose now clear. This was the keystone William had referenced, meant to fit into the circular depression in the chamber floor. Standing before the central stone with its concentric rings of symbols, Rebecca held the disc in her palm, studying its intricate carvings. The logical part of her mind, the careful researcher, the responsible parent, urged caution. Wait for the experts. Don't risk damaging evidence of potentially historic significance. Yet another part of her, a part she hadn't known existed until she first descended these stone steps, felt drawn to complete what William Harrington had begun. He had specified in his journal that the right successor would know how to proceed. Martha Jenkins had said the keys wouldn't work for just anyone. Kneeling beside the circular stone, Rebecca examined the central depression more carefully. It matched the dimensions of the disc perfectly, with small notches that would align with the carved patterns. This was no random artifact. It had been created specifically for this purpose, to activate whatever mapping sequence William had discovered. With careful deliberation, Rebecca placed the stone disc into the depression, aligning the tree symbol with a matching carving on the floor. For a moment nothing happened, and she felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. Then with a soft but distinct click, the disc settled more deeply into place, and the concentric rings of the floor stone began to rotate slowly, each ring moving in a different direction. Rebecca stepped back in astonishment. A soft blue light began to emanate from the carved symbols, growing stronger as the rotation continued. The light spread to the wall carvings, illuminating the map symbols one by one in a specific sequence. With each illuminated location, corresponding symbols glowed on the central floor stone, creating what appeared to be star-like patterns connecting the sites. The blue light grew more intense, and Rebecca shielded her eyes as it coalesced into a vertical beam rising from the central stone. Within this beam, translucent three-dimensional images formed, what appeared to be landscape features, structures, and geometric patterns floating in the air like a holographic projection, though no modern technology was evident. "Mom." Zoe's voice came from the stairway, startling Rebecca so badly she nearly fell. "What's happening? The whole house is vibrating." Rebecca turned to see her children standing wide-eyed at the chamber entrance, their faces illuminated by the pulsing blue. "Light!" "I don't know," she admitted, both awed and alarmed by what she had triggered. "I think I've activated some kind of mapping system." Finn approached fearlessly, his face filled with wonder as he studied the floating images. "It's showing places," he observed, pointing to what appeared to be a mountain range with a structure nestled within it. "Different places all across the map." Zoe moved more cautiously to her mother's side. "This isn't modern technology," she whispered. "Nothing from the 12th century could create something like this. Unless what Professor Harrington discovered wasn't just evidence of Welsh explorers," Rebecca said slowly, watching as the images shifted to show new locations. What if he found evidence of something else entirely, something that would rewrite history in ways even he wasn't prepared to reveal? As the three Sullivans stood transfixed by the impossible technology manifesting before them, they didn't notice the subtle vibrations traveling upward from deep beneath the chamber, nor the faint humming that seemed to come from within the stone walls themselves. They couldn't know that similar vibrations were now radiating from 11 other locations across the continent, some in remote wilderness, others buried beneath unremarkable modern structures like their own farmhouse. What Rebecca couldn't possibly have anticipated when she placed the key stone in its ancient receptacle was that the activation hadn't just created a map, it had sent a signal. In research facilities, universities, and government installations across the country, sensors designed to monitor seismic anomalies and electromagnetic fluctuations were suddenly registering unprecedented patterns, all emanating from locations that formed a perfect geometric array across the North American continent. And in Boston, where Dr. Eleanor Kincaid was hastily packing to leave her conference early, a secure phone was ringing. On the other end was a voice she hadn't heard in almost a decade, a colleague from her brief time working with a classified research division of the Smithsonian Institution. "It's activated, Eleanor," the voice said without preamble. "After all these years, someone has activated the first haven. Please tell me it's you." "Not me," Dr. Kincaid replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But I know where it is. I'm heading there now." "You're not the only one," came the grave response. "Every relevant agency from the Archaeological Survey Division to the Pentagon just went on high alert. Whatever William Harrington found, it's just become the highest priority historical site in North America. You need to get there first." What had begun as Rebecca Sullivan's desperate solution to a housing crisis had now escalated into something that would soon bring archaeologists, historians, and government officials converging on the previously forgotten farmhouse in Millfield, all seeking to understand the extraordinary technology that no medieval explorers could possibly have possessed, and the 12 interconnected sites that had remained hidden in plain sight for centuries. And at the center of this impending storm stood Rebecca and her children, ordinary people who had stumbled upon an extraordinary legacy that was already spiraling far beyond their control. The blue light from the activated chamber gradually dimmed over the following hours, but its effects lingered, both in the subtle vibration that continued to pulse through the farmhouse and in the stunned silence of the Sullivan family as they tried to process what they had witnessed. Rebecca had ushered the children upstairs after the initial activation, partly out of caution regarding the unknown technology they had encountered, but also from a growing awareness that they needed to prepare for what would inevitably follow. Dr. Kincaid would arrive tomorrow, likely with colleagues, and Rebecca wanted to document everything properly before outside experts took over. What exactly did we just see? Zoe asked as they sat around the kitchen table that evening, the generator humming outside to power their single lamp. That wasn't just a medieval map system, that was something else entirely. Holograms, Finn said, still wide-eyed with excitement. Like in sci-fi movies, but without any projectors. And it showed real places. I recognized the Rocky Mountains in one of the images. Rebecca nodded slowly. Whatever it was, it goes far beyond what Professor Harrington described in his journal. He wrote about a mapping sequence, but nothing that would explain three-dimensional projections appearing from stone. You don't think medieval Welsh explorers built that, do you? Zoe asked, her analytical mind already probing the inconsistencies. I don't know what to think, Rebecca admitted. But we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. There could be rational explanations we haven't considered. Like what? Finn challenged. Secret technology hidden for hundreds of years. Magic. Rebecca smiled despite her unease. Like sophisticated mechanisms we don't understand yet. History is full of ancient technologies that seem magical until they were properly studied. Greek fire, Damascus steel, Roman concrete that outperforms modern versions. But light projections from stone? Zoe remained skeptical. That's beyond mechanical ingenuity. Before Rebecca could respond, headlights swept across the kitchen window as a vehicle turned into their driveway. A moment later, Martha Jenkins was knocking at their door, her weathered face unusually grave. You used the keystone, she said without preamble when Rebecca let her in. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Rebecca asked, though she suspected. The answer. Every electronic device in my house went haywire about 3 hours ago. Clock radios reset themselves, TV turned on by itself. Even my old flip phone started chiming without any incoming calls. Martha shook her head. William said it would happen when the sequence was activated. You know more than you've told us, Rebecca observed, gesturing for Martha to sit at the kitchen table. The older woman sighed heavily, her gaze moving between Rebecca and the children. William shared only fragments with me, and I'm not sure he understood everything himself. But he believed the chamber beneath this house was built long before any recognized European contact with this continent, before the Vikings, before Columbus, before anyone in our history books. By whom? Zoe asked the obvious question. He never said directly. Always talked around it, used terms like the predecessors or the ancients. I got the impression he was afraid to make specific claims without absolute proof. Martha's weathered hands fidgeted with her worn wedding ring, but the artifacts he occasionally showed me, small items he felt safe bringing upstairs, they weren't like anything I'd seen in museums. Materials that weren't quite metal or stone, symbols that didn't match any known language. And this keystone, Rebecca pressed, pulling the disc from her pocket. Did he explain its purpose? Only that it would wake the network when the time was right, Martha replied. He said it was one of 12, and that they were meant to work in concert when all were placed in their proper housings. Rebecca felt a chill at the implications. I may have activated something prematurely. Martha shook her head. William always said it couldn't happen accidentally. The keys, the keystone, the timing, all had to align with the right intent. If you activated it successfully, you were meant to. After Martha left, having warned them to expect unusual visitors in the coming days, Rebecca returned to the basement chamber alone. The blue light had faded completely, but the disc remained firmly seated in its central depression, the surrounding rings now locked in their new configuration. The wall carvings that had illuminated during the activation sequence now showed subtle changes. New symbols had appeared alongside the original markings, and the map locations were more clearly defined, with what appeared to be coordinates in a notation system she didn't recognize. Rebecca carefully photographed everything with her phone, creating a record of the changes. Whatever happened when outside authorities arrived, She wanted her family to maintain some connection to this discovery that had literally appeared beneath their new home. On the modern desk, William's laptop now displayed a screensaver she hadn't seen before, a slowly rotating pattern of symbols that matched those on the walls. When she touched the keyboard, the screen changed to a password prompt. Rebecca tried various combinations based on William's notes, but nothing worked. Whatever secrets the historian had documented electronically remained locked for now. As she was about to leave the chamber, a faint sound caught her attention, a rhythmic pattern like Morse code tapping from somewhere within the stone walls. Rebecca followed the sound to a section of wall that had shown particularly bright illumination during the activation. Running her fingers over the stone, she felt a slight warmth and what might have been a subtle vibration. "What are you trying to tell us?" she whispered to the ancient structure, feeling slightly foolish but unable to shake the sense that the chamber was somehow responsive, almost alive with purpose. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with blue light and floating images of landscapes she had never seen but somehow recognized. When morning finally arrived, Rebecca felt both exhausted and strangely energized, as if the chamber's activation had synchronized something in her own awareness. She spent the early hours helping the children make the farmhouse more presentable for their coming visitors. Zoe attacked the kitchen with determined efficiency, while Finn appointed himself guardian of the basement door, solemnly promising to monitor for further activations. Shortly before noon, the distinctive sound of multiple vehicles on their gravel driveway announced the arrival of Dr. Kincaid's team. Rebecca had expected a small group of academics, perhaps with some specialized equipment. What she saw instead as she stepped onto the porch raised immediate concerns. 3 vehicles had arrived, a modest sedan that she assumed belonged to Dr. Kincaid, a large SUV with university markings, and most worryingly, an unmarked black van with government plates and satellite communication equipment visible on its roof. From the sedan emerged a woman Rebecca recognized from the online videos. Eleanor Kincaid, tall and commanding in practical field clothes, rather than the academic attire of her lectures. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. From the university SUV came 3 younger individuals with equipment cases, presumably research assistants or technical specialists. But it was the occupants of the black van that caused Rebecca's instinctive wariness. 2 men in business casual, attire that couldn't quite disguise their military bearing, and a woman whose crisp pantsuit and alert assessment of the surroundings screamed government agent. "Miss Sullivan," Dr. Kincaid called, approaching with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to this visit on such short notice. I hope you don't mind that I've brought some colleagues." Rebecca descended the porch steps, positioning herself between the visitors and the farmhouse, where Zoe and Finn watched warily from the windows. "You didn't mention government representatives would be joining us, Dr. Kincaid." The archaeologist had the grace to look slightly abashed, an unfortunate necessity. "The activation sequence yesterday triggered certain monitoring systems. Dr. Abrams," she indicated the woman in the pantsuit, "is from the Historical Preservation Division of the Department of Interior. Her presence ensures everything is properly documented according to federal guidelines for significant historical discoveries." It sounded reasonable, but Rebecca's years navigating university politics had honed her ability to detect carefully crafted explanations. "And the gentleman," she pressed. "Security consultants," Dr. Abrams interjected smoothly, stepping forward with an identification card that appeared official, but which Rebecca noted carefully revealed no specific agency affiliations. "Historical artifacts of potential national..." Significance require appropriate protective measures. We're merely here to advise on preservation protocols. Rebecca maintained her position, a mother bear protecting her territory. Before we proceed, I need absolute clarity on one point. This is my property, purchased legally and fully paid for. Whatever lies beneath it may have historical significance, but access to it runs through me and requires my permission. A moment of tension stretched between them before Dr. Kincaid nodded. Absolutely. We're guests here at your invitation, Ms. Sullivan. Our goal is to assist in properly documenting and understanding what William Harrington discovered. Dr. Abrams seemed less comfortable with this assertion of rights, but offered a tight smile. Of course, though I should note that under certain provisions of the National Historical Preservation Act, significant archaeological discoveries may qualify for special designation that would provide both protection and resources for proper study. The message was clear. They were acknowledging her ownership for now, but mechanisms existed to supersede it if deemed necessary. Rebecca decided to establish boundaries immediately. My children and I will accompany any examinations of the chamber. All findings will be shared with us, and no artifacts leave the property without my explicit consent. Are these terms acceptable? Dr. Kincaid exchanged glances with Dr. Abrams before responding. Entirely reasonable. Shall we begin? The next hour was consumed with preliminary preparations, setting up documentation equipment, establishing proper lighting, and creating a secure perimeter around the basement entrance. The university team worked with practiced efficiency while the security consultants maintained a watchful presence that Rebecca found increasingly unsettling. When they finally descended the stone staircase to the chamber, the reactions of the experts validated everything Rebecca had felt upon her own discovery. Dr. Kincaid stopped abruptly at the chamber entrance, her composure cracking into naked astonishment. "My God," she breathed, her gaze sweeping across the vaulted ceiling, carved walls, and central stone with its embedded keystone. "It's real. It's actually real." "You doubted it?" Rebecca asked, observing the archaeologist's reaction carefully. "Not doubted exactly," Dr. Kincaid replied, moving reverently into the chamber, her fingers hovering just above the stone surfaces without touching them. "William shared some of his theories with me years ago, before he withdrew from academic life. The 12 havens, the geometric pattern they formed across the continent, the potential pre-Columbian origins. But theories are one thing. This," she gestured to the surrounding chamber, "this is beyond anything I imagined." The university team immediately began documenting everything, laser scanning the dimensions, photographing every carving and artifact, recording the precise location of each item on the central stone table. Dr. Abrams observed with keen interest, occasionally murmuring into a small recorder, while the security consultants examined the chamber's construction with particular attention to the walls where the mapping projections had appeared. "You said an activation occurred yesterday?" Dr. Kincaid asked, studying the central stone with its embedded disc. Rebecca nodded, describing the sequence of events after she had placed the keystone. The rotating rings, the blue illumination, the three-dimensional projections showing landscapes and structures, and these wall markings changed afterward. Dr. Kincaid indicated the new symbols that had appeared following the activation. "Yes, additional symbols appeared, and the map locations became more defined." One of the security consultants approached, his interest clearly piqued. "The projected images, did they show specific coordinates or navigational references?" "Not that I recognized," Rebecca replied carefully. "But I'm not a cartographer." Dr. Abrams had moved to examine William's desk and research materials. "Has anyone attempted to access his computer files?" "The laptop is password protected," Rebecca explained. "I tried several logical combinations based on his notes, but nothing worked." While the experts continued their examination, Zoe approached Rebecca with a concerned expression. "Mom, there's someone else here," she whispered, nodding toward the window. An old station wagon just parked behind the black van, and a man is taking photos of their equipment. Rebecca excused herself and climbed the stairs, curious about this new arrival. Through the kitchen window, she spotted a weather-beaten, blue station wagon with what appeared to be a small satellite dish mounted on its roof. A man in his 30s, with disheveled hair and a rumpled jacket, was indeed photographing the government vehicle's communications array with a professional-grade camera. When Rebecca stepped onto the porch, the man immediately turned his camera in her direction, then lowered it with an apologetic wave. "Sorry for the intrusion," he called, approaching with a press credential already extended. "Miles Thornton, investigative reporter, Unexplained America Digital Network. Word spreading about unusual energy readings from this location. Any comment on what's happening at the Harrington property?" Rebecca's heart sank. This was exactly the kind of attention they didn't need. A reporter from what sounded like a fringe media outlet focused on conspiracy theories and paranormal events. "There's nothing to report," she stated firmly. "We're simply renovating our new home." Miles Thornton raised an eyebrow skeptically. With assistance from Dr. Eleanor Kincaid, leading expert on pre-Columbian European contact theories, and representatives from a classified division of the Interior Department. That's quite a renovation team. Before Rebecca could formulate a response, Dr. Abrams emerged from the house, the security consultants flanking her immediately. "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged with evident displeasure, "still chasing government shadows, I see." "Dr. Abrams," the reporter replied with equal recognition, "still classifying archaeological discoveries that contradict official historical narratives." The tension between them was palpable. Rebecca glanced between them, realizing there was history here that might prove relevant to her own situation. "You two know each other?" she asked. "We've crossed paths," Dr. Abrams replied tersely. "Mr. Thornton has a talent for appearing at sensitive research sites and publishing irresponsible speculation about their significance. And Dr. Abrams has a talent for making important discoveries disappear into government warehouses, never to be studied by independent researchers," Thornton countered. "Just ask her about the Serpent Mound anomalies or the Lake Superior petroglyphs." One of the security consultants stepped forward. "This is private property, Mr. Thornton. I suggest you leave immediately." "Actually," Rebecca interjected, surprising herself with a sudden decision, "I'd like to hear what Mr. Thornton knows about Dr. Abrams's previous work. Perhaps you could join us for coffee, Mr. Thornton." The reporter looked as startled as the UO. "Government representatives by this invitation." Dr. Abrams's expression darkened considerably, but with witnesses present, including Zoe, who had joined her mother on the porch, she maintained a professional demeanor. "Miss Sullivan, I strongly advise against involving the press at this preliminary stage. Premature publicity could compromise the integrity of the site. I'm not inviting Mr. Thornton to view the chamber," Rebecca clarified, "just to share some historical context that might prove relevant to understanding it properly." In the kitchen, while the experts continued their work in the basement chamber, Miles Thornton explained his interest in the Harrington property. "I've been tracking William Harrington's research for years," he revealed, accepting the coffee Rebecca offered. "He was one of several prominent academics who discovered anomalous archaeological evidence and subsequently withdrew from public, scholarly life. It's a pattern that caught my attention." "What pattern?" Zoe asked, her curiosity overcoming her initial skepticism of the rumpled reporter. "Respected researchers find evidence that contradicts established historical narratives about pre-Columbian contact with North America. Shortly afterward, they either recant their findings, change their research focus entirely, or in cases like Harrington's, withdraw from academic life completely. Thornton pulled a tablet from his battered messenger bag, displaying a spreadsheet of names, discoveries, and subsequent career changes. "You're suggesting some kind of suppression," Rebecca observed. "Not exactly conspiracy, but definitely institutional resistance," Thornton clarified. "Academia has investment in established narratives. Government agencies have concerns about the implications of certain discoveries for territorial claims, indigenous rights, even national identity constructs." "And Dr. Abrams's role in this?" Rebecca pressed. Thornton's expression grew more serious. "She heads a little-known division that operates between the Smithsonian, the Interior Department, and certain intelligence agencies. Officially, they preserve historically sensitive discoveries. Unofficially, they control which findings reach public awareness and which don't." Rebecca considered this information carefully. "What happened with the Serpent Mound anomalies you mentioned?" "Ground-penetrating radar detected chamber structures beneath the mound that showed evidence of advanced engineering techniques inconsistent with the known capabilities of the cultures who supposedly built it. Dr. Abrams' team took over the excavation, classified all findings, and eventually released a report concluding the anomalies were natural geological formations." Thornton's frustration was evident. Independent researchers were denied access to verify these conclusions. Before their conversation could continue, the basement door opened and Dr. Kincaid emerged, her expression troubled. She stopped short. Upon seeing Thornton at the kitchen table, "Miss Sullivan, could I speak with you privately?" In the front parlor, Dr. Kincaid didn't mince words. "Whatever Miles Thornton has told you, you need to understand he's not an objective source. He's built his career sensationalizing archaeological discoveries." "And Dr. Abrams?" Rebecca countered. "Is she an objective arbiter of historical truth?" Dr. Kincaid sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's complicated. The Historical Preservation Division does classify certain findings, but usually for legitimate reasons. Fragile evidence requiring protection, artifacts with cultural sensitivity for indigenous peoples, discoveries with potential international, diplomatic implications, and what category does my basement chamber fall into? That's what concerns me," Dr. Kincaid admitted. "The technology evident in that chamber, the activation capabilities, the projections you described, the communication system it seems connected to, goes far beyond anything that should exist in a structure of apparent medieval origin. Dr. Abrams is already making calls to bring in specialized equipment and additional personnel. You're worried they'll take control of the site," Rebecca surmised. "I'm worried they'll classify it beyond even my access level." "Yes." Dr. Kincaid's gaze was direct. "William Harrington was my mentor, Miss Sullivan. His research deserves proper academic evaluation, not disappearance into government archives." A commotion from the kitchen interrupted them. Finn burst into the parlor, his expression animated. "Mum, the stone disc is doing something new!" They rushed back to the basement chamber, where one of the university researchers was frantically documenting a new phenomenon. The keystone embedded in the central floor was pulsing with renewed blue light, and the symbols around it were rotating. "Again. It started a few minutes ago," Dr. Abrams explained, her professional composure unable to completely mask her excitement. "No apparent trigger. The sequence is different from what you described yesterday." The blue light intensified, but instead of projecting three-dimensional landscapes as before, it coalesced into a tightly focused beam that shot upward to the chamber ceiling. Where it touched the stone surface, a new set of symbols began to appear, not carved, but seeming to emerge from within the stone itself, glowing with the same azure luminescence. "It's a message," Dr. Kincaid breathed, her academic training momentarily overwhelmed by wonder. "The system is communicating." "Can anyone read it?" Rebecca asked, looking around at the assembled experts. Dr. Kincaid's expression was troubled. Some symbols resemble Ogham script, an ancient Celtic writing system. Others appear similar to Norse runes, but the configuration is unlike any historical language I've studied. It's evolving, observed one of the university researchers, pointing as new symbols continued to form. The pattern is changing as we watch. Dr. Abrams had moved to stand directly beneath the forming message, her recorder held high to capture every detail. This confirms it's an active communication system, not just a historical artifact. We need to initiate containment protocols immediately. The term sent a chill through Rebecca. Containment? This is my home, Dr. Abrams, not a government facility. A home that happens to contain technology of unknown origin and capabilities, Dr. Abrams countered. Technology that is actively transmitting to other locations as we speak. This was news to Rebecca. Transmitting? What do you mean? One of the security consultants stepped forward, dropping any pretense of being merely an advisor. The energy signature activated yesterday was detected at 11 other locations across North America, Ms. Sullivan. All sites began transmitting coordinated signals within minutes of your activation of this chamber. The implications were staggering. William Harrington had been right. The 12 havens were real, interconnected, and now somehow awakening in synchrony. But the technology involved clearly transcended anything that medieval explorers could have created. I need to make something very clear, Dr. Abrams stated with renewed authority. What we're witnessing here falls under National Security Directive 1067, governing unprecedented technological discoveries of unknown origin. I've already initiated the appropriate protocols, and a specialized containment team will arrive within hours. You have no jurisdiction here, Rebecca protested, though she could feel control of the situation slipping away. This is private property. Actually, Ms. Sullivan, Dr. Abrams replied with what might have been genuine regret. When you activated the transmission network yesterday, jurisdiction became significantly more complicated. I've been authorized to offer you 2 options. She proceeded to outline what amounted to an ultimatum. The Sullivan family could either accept temporary relocation while the site was fully investigated under government supervision, with generous compensation and eventual return of limited access rights, or they could remain but under strict monitoring conditions that would essentially turn their home into a secure research facility. And if I refuse both options, Rebecca challenged, then we move to involuntary acquisition under national security provisions, Dr. Abrams stated bluntly. I strongly advise against forcing that approach. As this confrontation unfolded, the blue light from the ceiling symbols suddenly intensified, and a new phenomenon began. The message sequence completed, and the light began to gather into a swirling pattern directly above the central stone. Within this vortex, something was forming, a spherical projection composed of intricate, interlocking geometric patterns that slowly rotated in midair. Everyone in the chamber, regardless of their institutional affiliations or professional objectivity, fell silent in collective awe. The sphere continued to develop in complexity, adding layers of patterns that somehow conveyed both mathematical precision and artistic beauty. It's showing us something, Finn whispered, his young voice cutting through the silence. It's trying. To explain, Rebecca found herself nodding in agreement with her son's intuitive assessment. This didn't feel like an activation of ancient technology. It felt like a response, almost like a conversation initiated by their presence and attention. Before anyone could comment further, the sphere projection suddenly expanded, filling the chamber with a 3-dimensional map of star systems. Specific stars were highlighted, connected by lines that formed a pattern remarkably similar to the one marking the 12 sites across North America. "Those are star coordinates," gasped one of the university researchers, a young woman whose specialization Rebecca hadn't caught earlier. "Precise stellar cartography showing," she faltered, running calculations on a small device she pulled from her pocket. "These are accurate positions from approximately 10,000 years ago." The implications hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Whatever had created this chamber and its extraordinary technology predated not just Columbus or Viking explorers, but humanity's earliest recorded civilizations. Dr. Abrams broke the stunned silence, her voice tightly controlled. "This confirms the necessity for immediate Level 5 containment. All civilian personnel will need to vacate the chamber while we secure the projection mechanism." "That's not going to happen," Rebecca stated firmly, protectiveness for both the chamber and her children, overriding any intimidation she might have felt. "This technology has existed safely beneath this farmhouse for centuries. It activated because it was meant to, when the proper sequence was followed by the intended recipient." "You can't possibly believe William Harrington intended this for you specifically," Dr. Abrams countered. "You purchased this property by random chance." "Did I?" Rebecca challenged, surprising herself with her certainty. "Out of thousands of properties, I found this one at exactly the time I needed affordable housing. The keys worked for me when the county couldn't find them for 15 years. The keystone activated when I placed it." Dr. Kincaid had been studying the star projection with intense concentration. Now she looked up, her expression transformed by a new understanding. "She's right, Victoria. This isn't random. William believed the 12 havens were designed to be rediscovered at a specific time by specific people who would recognize their significance." "That's mystical nonsense," Dr. Abrams dismissed. "We're dealing with advanced technology of unknown origin that poses potential national security implications." "We're dealing with a historical legacy meant to be found," Dr. Kincaid countered. "And I believe Rebecca Sullivan is part of that intended discovery process." As the two women faced off, the star projection above them began to change again. The highlighted stars pulsed more brightly, and new lines formed between them, creating a more complex pattern that somehow seemed familiar to Rebecca. "It matches!" Finn exclaimed suddenly, pointing between the star map and the symbols on the keystone. "The pattern is the same." He was right, Rebecca realized. The stellar configuration matched the central design on the keystone, the stylized tree whose branches formed a perfect circle. But it wasn't a tree at all, she now understood. It was a map, a star map preserved in stone and metal, waiting for the right moment to be activated and understood. Dr. Abrams was speaking urgently into a secure phone, requesting immediate deployment of what sounded like a significant government response team. The security consultants had moved to secure the chamber entrance, while the university researchers continued documenting everything with frantic intensity, aware their access might soon be terminated. In the midst of this escalating situation, Rebecca felt a strange calm descend over her. Whatever forces had brought her family to this farmhouse, whatever ancient technology now revealed itself beneath their new home, she sensed it was unfolding exactly as intended. Not by William Harrington, perhaps not even by the medieval explorers he had studied, but by whoever had created these chambers millennia ago, creators who had embedded star maps from 10,000 years in the past and scattered 12 interconnected sites across a continent in a precise geometric pattern. The blue light from the projection suddenly intensified again, and a new symbol appeared at the center of the star map, a simple spiral that began to rotate slowly. As it turned, the same spiral pattern appeared briefly on Rebecca's palm, glowing with the same azure luminescence, visible to everyone in the chamber. Dr. Abrams stared in shock. "What just happened?" "I think," Rebecca said slowly, looking at the fading mark on her hand. "It just confirmed that I'm supposed to be here." What she couldn't possibly have anticipated when she first turned the key in the heavy basement door was that this moment, standing in a chamber of impossible technology, as government agents prepared to seize control, was actually just the beginning of a much larger revelation. The 12 havens were awakening across the continent, each site responding to the initial activation she had triggered, each preparing to reveal its portion of a message left by visitors who had reached North America, not hundreds, but thousands, of years before conventional history recorded. And somehow, through a chain of circumstances that seemed too perfect to be coincidental, Rebecca Sullivan and her children now stood at the center of a discovery that would soon challenge humanity's understanding of not just its history, but potentially its origins. The 24 hours following the star map's appearance in the chamber became a whirlwind of activity that transformed the Sullivan family's quiet farmhouse into something resembling a secure research facility. Despite Dr. Abrams' initial insistence on evacuation, Rebecca had refused to leave, standing her ground with unexpected determination. "This property is mine, and whatever message is being revealed here seems specifically intended for me," she had stated firmly. "We're staying." Dr. Kincaid had unexpectedly supported her position, arguing that the chamber's apparent recognition of Rebecca suggested her presence might be crucial to understanding its full purpose. After several tense phone calls with superiors, Dr. Abrams reluctantly agreed to a compromise. The Sullivan family could remain, but under conditions that included constant security presence and government oversight of all chamber activities. By the following morning, the farmhouse was surrounded by temporary structures, equipment tents, security checkpoints, and mobile research units. Teams of specialists arrived hourly, each bringing expertise in fields ranging from archaeoastronomy to quantum physics. Local residents watched from a distance as their forgotten rural community suddenly filled with government vehicles and satellite communication arrays. Inside the house, Rebecca insisted on maintaining some semblance of normal family life, despite the extraordinary circumstances. Zoe had established a makeshift study area in the dining room, balancing her delayed school preparations with meticulous documentation of everything happening in the chamber. Finn had appointed himself liaison between the various research teams, his natural curiosity and disarming questions often eliciting information that more guarded adults might have withheld. In the chamber itself, the star projection had remained constant for hours after its initial appearance, then suddenly collapsed back into the central stone. Since then, the keystone had pulsed with intermittent blue light, as if conserving energy between communications. The ceiling symbols remained, however, now recognized by linguists as a previously unknown script that combined elements from multiple ancient writing systems. Miles Thornton had refused to leave, parking his station wagon at Martha Jenkins' property and establishing an informal information exchange with the growing number of local residents curious about the activity at the Harrington farmhouse. Despite Dr. Abrams' attempts to establish a media blackout, word was spreading through alternative news channels and academic networks that something unprecedented had been discovered. On the morning of the second day, as Rebecca sat at her kitchen table reviewing the complex access agreements Dr. Abrams had presented for her signature, a commotion outside drew her attention. Through the window, she saw a sleek black helicopter landing in the far field, kicking up dust that swirled around the security perimeter. "Who's that?" Finn asked, peering over her shoulder as a group of individuals in formal attire emerged from the aircraft. "More government officials, I imagine," Rebecca replied wearily. The constant influx of personnel with increasingly higher security clearances had become a pattern. Dr. Abrams appeared at the kitchen door, her usual composure notably heightened. Ms. Sullivan, the National Science Advisor has arrived with representatives from several key agencies. They've requested an immediate briefing on the chamber and its capabilities. More accurately, came a new voice from behind Dr. Abrams. We've requested to meet the woman who has successfully activated a technology that has confounded our best experts for decades. Into the kitchen stepped a distinguished woman in her 60s. Her silver hair swept into an elegant updo, and her bearing suggesting both academic authority and political influence. Dr. Catherine Westmore, National Science Advisor to the President, was a legendary figure in scientific circles, a theoretical physicist who had transitioned to guiding national research policy with remarkable effectiveness. Dr. Westmore, Rebecca acknowledged, recognizing her from news coverage of breakthrough scientific announcements. I wasn't aware my basement had attracted attention at your level. Your basement, Ms. Sullivan, has triggered alerts across systems monitoring anomalous energy signatures throughout North America. Dr. Westmore's direct gaze held neither the academic curiosity of Dr. Kincaid nor the controlling authority of Dr. Abrams, but something more complex, a combination of scientific fascination and what might have been concern. More importantly, it has confirmed the existence of something my office has been tracking for the past 30 years. Rebecca felt a chill at this revelation. You already knew about the chamber. Not this specific chamber, no, but we've been aware of unusual energy patterns at certain geometric points across the continent since satellite monitoring became sophisticated enough to detect them. William Harrington's research came to our attention in the 1990s when he began making discreet inquiries about these locations. Dr. Abrams looked startled by this disclosure. I wasn't informed that Harrington had been flagged at that level. It was compartmentalized, Dr. Westmore replied simply, before turning back to Rebecca. What makes your activation significant, Ms. Sullivan, is that it's the first time one of these sites has responded with direct communication. The others have shown energy fluctuations, but nothing approaching the organized data transmission your chamber has demonstrated. The implications were clear. The government had known about at least some aspects of the 12 Havens long before. Rebecca purchased the farmhouse, but had been unable to activate or understand their purpose. Why did it respond to me? Rebecca asked the question that had been haunting her since the spiral symbol had appeared on her palm. Dr. Westmore's expression softened slightly. That's precisely what we hope to understand. Would you be willing to show me the chamber? Unlike the previous experts who had descended into the basement with equipment and preconceptions, Dr. Westmore approached the ancient structure with reverent humility. She examined the stone walls without touching them, studied the central platform with its embedded keystone, and spent long minutes contemplating the symbols on the ceiling. Remarkable preservation, she murmured. And you say William Harrington discovered this intact beneath the house? According to his journals, he found evidence of the structure when he purchased the property in the 1970s, Rebecca explained. He spent decades carefully excavating and documenting it. Dr. Westmore nodded thoughtfully. William was a brilliant researcher, methodical in ways most academics aren't. His work on medieval navigation techniques attracted attention from unexpected quarters, including naval intelligence and certain space program divisions. This was new information that even Dr. Kincaid, now hovering attentively nearby, seemed surprised by. Space program connections? She echoed. His analysis of ancient stellar navigation methods proved useful for developing certain backup systems, Dr. Westmore explained vaguely, before returning her attention to the chamber itself. What's most remarkable is how this structure has responded to you specifically, Ms. Sullivan. The spiral marking that appeared on your palm. May I see your hand? Rebecca extended her hand, though the glowing symbol had faded hours ago. Dr. Westmore examined it carefully, then removed a small device from her pocket that emitted a soft purple light when passed over Rebecca's skin. Where the spiral had appeared, faint traces of an unusual pattern remained visible under this specialized illumination. "Quantum resonance markers," Dr. Westmore said, more to herself than to those watching. "Fascinating." "What does that mean?" Rebecca asked, trying to keep the alarm from her voice. Dr. Westmore considered her response carefully. "In the simplest terms, it appears the chamber's technology has established a form of quantum entanglement with your biological signature. A connection, if you will, that transcends conventional physical interaction. You're saying I'm somehow linked to this place?" The idea was simultaneously disturbing and strangely validating. "Linked to the network it's part of, more likely," Dr. Westmore clarified, "which brings me to the primary reason for my visit. The activation sequence you initiated has cascaded across all 12 sites we've been monitoring. 3 days ago, they were dormant or minimally active. Now they're all showing increasing energy signatures consistent with some form of system-wide awakening." From a leather portfolio, she withdrew a tablet displaying a map of North America with 12 points marked in glowing blue, one at their current location, the others distributed in a geometric pattern across the continent. Each point pulsed with light in a synchronized rhythm. "What does this mean?" Rebecca asked, though some part of her felt she already knew. "It means," Dr. Westmore replied with surprising gentleness, "that you've initiated something that was designed to activate only when specific conditions were met, something that has waited a very long time to deliver its message." As if responding to her words, the keystone in the central platform suddenly pulsed with renewed intensity. The blue light spread outward along the concentric rings, then rose in a column to the ceiling, where the mysterious symbols began to glow sequentially, as if being read aloud in some silent language. "It's responding to our conversation, Doctor," Kincaid observed with academic wonder. "No," Dr. Westmore corrected quietly, "it's responding to her." She nodded toward Rebecca, whose palm had begun to glow again with the spiral pattern. A new development startled everyone present. The blue light extended beyond the chamber ceiling, passing through the solid stone as if it weren't there, and continuing upward through the farmhouse structure. Rebecca rushed upstairs, followed by the others, to find a column of azure luminescence now extending from the floor of the main hallway, up through the roof, and into the sky above. Outside, government personnel were reacting with controlled alarm, scientific instruments being hastily directed toward the beam. But what truly astonished Rebecca was the sight of 11 other identical blue columns visible on the horizon in different directions, each a perfectly straight line reaching from Earth to sky despite being miles distant. "The network is fully activated," Dr. Westmore stated, a hint of awe breaking through her scientific detachment. "All 12 nodes are now in communication." "Communication with what?" Rebecca asked, voicing the question everyone present was thinking. Before anyone could speculate, the blue columns began to pulse in synchronized rhythm, creating a visual cadence that reminded Rebecca of a heartbeat. Simultaneously, her own palm throbbed with the same rhythm, the spiral pattern glowing more intensely with each pulse. An urgent shout came from one of the technical specialists monitoring equipment nearby. "Massive energy buildup detected. Something's forming at the convergence points." High above the Earth, at points where the 12 blue columns extended beyond the atmosphere, spheres of swirling energy were indeed taking shape, visible only through the specialized equipment hastily assembled. Around the farmhouse, on view screens being monitored by government scientists, these spheres appeared to be organizing into a larger geometric pattern, connecting with threads of light to form a massive network surrounding the planet. Dr. Abrams approached with barely contained urgency. "We need to shut this down immediately. The energy signatures are off the charts, and attracting attention from multiple international monitoring systems. "We can't shut it down," Dr. Westmore replied calmly, "and I suspect we're meant to witness this." As if confirming her words, the blue column in the farmhouse suddenly expanded, the light filling the main hallway before coalescing into a three-dimensional projection unlike anything they had seen before. It showed a group of humanoid figures, similar to humans in overall appearance, but with subtle anatomical differences that suggested a different evolutionary path. Their technology, visible in the detailed projection of what appeared to be a vast chamber similar to but much larger than the one beneath the farmhouse, was both organic and geometric, blending seamlessly with their environment. One figure stepped forward from the group, its features resolving into greater detail. Though alien, its expression conveyed an unmistakable intelligence and purpose. When it spoke, the sound emerged not from the projection, but seemed to form directly in the minds of those watching, each hearing it in their own language with perfect clarity. "Greetings, inheritors. The awakening sequence has been successfully initiated. After 10,000 years of dormancy, the caretaker network is now restored to operational status." Rebecca felt, rather than heard, collective gasps from the assembled experts. The implications of this single greeting, extraterrestrial contact established millennia ago, a dormant network spanning North America, technology beyond current human understanding, were paradigm-shifting in ways that would reverberate through every field of human knowledge. "Who are you?" she found herself asking, somehow certain that the projection could hear her. "We are the Seeded Stars Collective, travelers who visited this world during its early development of intelligent species. We established the Caretaker Network to monitor planetary conditions and eventually to communicate with those who evolved the capacity to understand our message." "What is this message?" Dr. Westmore asked, stepping forward beside Rebecca. The projected figure's expression shifted subtly. Was that a smile? "The message is multi-layered, as is appropriate for a developing species approaching a critical evolutionary juncture. First, confirmation that you are not alone in the cosmos, though this you have likely already theorized. Second, historical context for certain anomalous developments in your species' evolution that have long puzzled your scientists." The projection shifted to show DNA strands transforming over time, punctuated by what appeared to be deliberate modifications at specific historical points. "We provided occasional guidance to your evolutionary path, subtle adjustments to accelerate cognitive development, immunological resilience, and cooperative capacity. The humans who discovered our monitoring chambers in later millennia, those you called Welsh explorers, found only remnants of our presence, misinterpreting our technology through their cultural framework." The revelation stunned everyone present. Dr. Kincaid looked particularly shaken, her life's work on medieval exploration suddenly recontextualized as humans encountering the remnants of an extraterrestrial monitoring system. "The third and most critical component of our message," the figure continued, "concerns your immediate future. Your species has reached the development threshold where planetary stewardship capabilities must align with technological advancement. The Caretaker Network has been programmed to activate when both technological capacity and ecological crisis reach specific parameters." The projection changed again, showing Earth with visualization of climate patterns, resource distributions, and energy systems, all depicted with a clarity and comprehensiveness beyond current human modeling capabilities. This network now offers access to specific technologies and knowledge systems that will enable transition to sustainable planetary management without civilizational collapse. The quantum resonance connection established with the primary receiver, the figure nodded toward Rebecca, provides the necessary biological authentication to unlock these knowledge repositories. Rebecca's mind reeled at the implications. Why me? I bought this house by chance. The projected figure's expression conveyed something like gentle amusement. There is no randomness in quantum-entangled systems. Your biological signature carries specific markers our system was designed to recognize, descendants of those we interacted with directly thousands of years ago. Your arrival at this specific node, when global conditions reached critical parameters, was statistically inevitable within our models. Dr. Westmore stepped forward again. What exactly are you offering humanity through this network? A transition path, came the simple reply. Technologies and methodologies that will allow continuation of your civilization while restoring planetary equilibrium. Not solutions imposed, but tools offered. Your species must choose how to implement them and evolve your social structures accordingly. The implications hung in the air. An advanced civilization had established contact with Earth thousands of years ago, left monitoring technology that had been misinterpreted by later human visitors, and programmed it to activate when humanity reached both the crisis point and technological readiness to receive their message. And somehow, through what the beings presented as quantum inevitability, but felt to Rebecca like impossible coincidence, her family had become the key to unlocking this ancient communication. The primary receiver must now make a choice. The projected figure continued, focusing its attention directly on Rebecca. The caretaker network can be fully activated, making its knowledge repositories available to your species through controlled access points. Or it can be returned to dormancy for another cycle, if you judge your civilization unready for this. Transition. Rebecca felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Government officials, scientists, security personnel, and most importantly, her children, who had appeared at the top of the stairs, watching with wide-eyed wonder. This shouldn't be my decision, she protested. I'm not qualified to make choices that affect all of humanity. Yet you are the one the system has recognized, the figure replied simply. The quantum resonance pattern cannot be falsified or transferred. This is the security protocol designed to prevent misuse of the knowledge being offered. In that moment of impossible pressure, Rebecca looked to her children. Zoe's expression was thoughtful but resolute, while Finn's held simple, trust in his mother's judgment. She thought of their journey to this place, the financial struggles, the desperate housing search, the seeming misfortune that had led them to this remote farmhouse. Had it all been leading to this moment, guided by quantum patterns established? Millennia ago, if I agree to activation, she asked carefully, who controls the knowledge being offered? I won't be responsible for creating new power imbalances or technologies that could be weaponized. The projected figure nodded, as if expecting this concern. The network's design prevents unilateral control. Knowledge repositories can only be accessed through consensus protocols, requiring collaboration across cultural and national boundaries. The primary receiver serves as facilitator, not controller. Dr. Westmore stepped closer to Rebecca. Whatever you decide, you should know that the implications extend far beyond any single nation's interests. If this is genuine, and every indication suggests it is, this communication represents the most significant moment in human history. Rebecca took a deep breath, centering herself amidst the extraordinary circumstances. She thought of William Harrington, who had spent decades meticulously documenting this chamber without fully understanding its true origins or purpose. She thought of her children's future on a planet facing ecological challenges that sometimes seemed insurmountable. And she thought of the strange journey that had brought her here, broke, desperate for housing, and seemingly by chance to the exact place where this ancient message had waited for millennia. I accept the activation, she said finally, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her decision. But I want guarantees that this knowledge will be shared equitably, not hoarded or weaponized. The projected figure inclined its head in what appeared to be approval. The network's design incorporates these principles. Appropriate safeguards are embedded within the technology itself. With these words, the blue light throughout the 12 columns intensified dramatically. Rebecca's palm burned briefly as the spiral symbol flared one final time, then faded into her skin like a barely visible birthmark rather than disappearing completely. The caretaker network is now fully activated, the figure announced. Knowledge repositories at all 12 nodes can be accessed through appropriate protocols. The primary receiver and her genetic lineage will retain authentication authority for the standard cycle of 1,000 years. Before anyone could react to this astonishing time frame, the projection began to fade. We wish your species success in its evolutionary journey. The choices ahead remain yours, as they must for true development to occur. We will monitor your progress through the network and await potential direct communication when you have successfully implemented the initial transition technologies. With these final words, the projection disappeared entirely. The blue column contracted and then dissipated, leaving the farmhouse hallway in sudden, ordinary daylight. Outside, reports came in that the other 11 columns had similarly disappeared, though instruments detected continued energy signatures at each location, suggesting dormant but active systems. In the stunned silence that followed, Finn broke the tension with characteristic directness. "Mom, does this mean we're staying in the farmhouse?" The simple question, so domestic amidst the cosmic implications of what they had just experienced, broke the spell of solemnity. Rebecca laughed, drawing her children into her arms. "Yes, Finn, I think we're definitely staying." In the days that followed, the Sullivan farmhouse became the center of unprecedented international attention. Representatives from major world governments, scientific institutions, and eventually the United Nations established protocols for studying and accessing the knowledge repositories now active at all 12 nodes of what was being called the Caretaker Network. True to the projected being's explanation, Rebecca discovered that her authentication was required for initial access at each site, necessitating travel to all 12 locations scattered across North America. More surprisingly, the knowledge contained in these repositories could only be extracted when teams with diverse expertise and cultural backgrounds worked in genuine collaboration. Any attempt at unilateral control or exploitation simply resulted in the systems becoming temporarily dormant. The farmhouse itself was designated a protected historical site of unprecedented importance, though Rebecca maintained ownership and residence rights through a complex international agreement. Government facilities were established nearby rather than directly on the property, preserving the Sullivan family's privacy while accommodating the constant flow of researchers seeking access to the chamber. 6 months after the initial activation, the first technological implementations derived from the Caretaker Network's knowledge repositories began field testing. Atmospheric carbon capture systems based on biological principles far advanced from current human science, water purification, methods that required minimal energy input, and agricultural approaches that restored soil health while increasing yields. Each innovation was made freely available through open-source platforms, preventing monopolization by any corporation or nation. For Rebecca, the transformation extended beyond the global implications to her personal circumstances. From a struggling single mother facing eviction, she had become what some called humanity's ambassador to its cosmic heritage, a role she accepted with reluctance but growing confidence. The financial struggles that had once consumed her daily life were replaced with the challenge of navigating complex international negotiations while maintaining a somewhat normal life for her children. Zoe had embraced the scientific aspects of their new reality, developing a particular interest in the linguistic patterns embedded in the caretaker network's communication systems. At 14, she was already collaborating with leading linguists and mathematicians to develop better translation protocols for accessing the repository's knowledge. Finn, with his intuitive understanding of patterns, had become something of a prodigy at interpreting the network's geometric interfaces, often seeing connections that trained scientists missed. His education had become thoroughly unconventional, combining standard curriculum with direct mentorship from experts in fields ranging from quantum physics to anthropology. As for Rebecca herself, the spiral marking on her palm remained, a faint, silvery pattern visible only in certain light, a permanent reminder of her unexpected role in human history. Dr. Westmore had become both colleague and friend, helping navigate the political complexities while ensuring scientific integrity in the study of the network's offerings. 1 year after purchasing the Shabby Farmhouse in a desperate attempt to provide shelter for her family, Rebecca stood on the newly restored porch, watching the sunset over fields that now contained both the original agricultural land and cutting-edge research facilities built with careful respect for the rural landscape. Martha Jenkins joined her, the elderly neighbor having become something of a surrogate grandmother to the Sullivan children amidst the whirlwind of changes. "William would be pleased," she observed, nodding toward the carefully preserved barn where historical exhibits now detailed both Harrington's research and the true origins of what he had discovered. "He always said the right person would come along when the time was right. I still wonder sometimes if it's all been some elaborate coincidence," Rebecca admitted. "All the factors that led us here, my job loss, the housing crisis, finding this specific property." Martha smiled with the wisdom of her years. "Perhaps it's both, dear. Perhaps the universe does work in patterns we're only beginning to understand, guiding us to where we need to be through what looks like random chance." Rebecca's hand drifted unconsciously to the faint spiral pattern on her palm. "Our visitors from the Seeded Stars Collective would certainly say so." "And what do you say?" Martha asked gently. Rebecca considered the question, watching as Finn raced across the yard to show Dr. Kincaid his latest insight about the chamber's geometric properties, while Zoe sat nearby deep in conversation with visiting researchers. "I say that sometimes finding your place in the world looks nothing like you imagined," she replied finally. "A year ago, I was just trying to keep a roof over our heads. Now, we're part of something that spans millennia and extends beyond our planet." She paused, looking out over the property that had transformed from a desperate last resort into the center of humanity's most profound discovery. "But in the ways that matter most, we found exactly what we needed: a home, purpose, and hope for the future. Not just for us, but for everyone." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the faint blue glow from the chamber below the farmhouse became visible through the basement windows, a gentle reminder that beneath this ordinary rural dwelling lay an extraordinary connection to the cosmos. Awakened by a single mother who had simply been looking for an affordable place to raise her children, what had begun as Rebecca Sullivan's desperate attempt to solve a housing crisis had evolved into humanity's introduction to its place in a larger cosmic community, a transformation as profound for her family as it was for human civilization itself. And it had all started with a shabby farmhouse purchase that had led to a discovery that indeed stunned not just archaeologists, but the entire world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.